For us here in Vancouver, BC, this is really a historic moment that the entire city is celebrating with us today, where we've really put Vancouver on the North American map as an emerging tech hub. And it's obviously a huge deal for legal tech.
Today on LawNext, I am up in Burnaby, British Columbia, in the headquarters of Clio, the cloud practice management platform. And I'm sitting here with the co-founder and CEO of Clio, Jack Newton. And as Jack was just saying to me, it seems like we've sat down and had these conversations a few times over the years. But Jack, how you doing today?
I'm great. Great to be joining you here, Bob.
And this is a special edition of LawNext. I am up here because of a special event that was held here this morning at Clio's headquarters. Jack made an announcement that's pretty big news. But first, let's hear from the sponsors who generously support LawNext. And now, on to this week's interview. So, Jack, why don't you just begin by recapping for us the headline?
Sure. So the headline is that Clio has successfully closed its Series D financing round, which is a $250 million US round led by TCV and JMI Equity. These are two new financial partners that we're extremely excited to be working with. These are companies that have an unbelievable track record of investing in companies that have really transformed the industries in which they reside. Companies like Airbnb, like Spotify, like Netflix, that have really become enduring companies that have really reframed how the businesses that they operate within operate. And we think that there's a very similar opportunity in legal for Clio, and obviously TCV and JMI are equally excited about the opportunity that lays ahead for Clio in the legal sector.
Yeah, there are a lot of things that are significant about this, but one is simply the size of the dollars involved here. I mean, put that in perspective. How does that compare in sort of the legal tech industry and here in Canada?
So at $250 million, this is a historic sized investment in a few different ways. Number one, it's large by any measure in U.S. or Canada in investment spheres. This is a big deal, both literally and figuratively. In Canada, it's the largest venture capital investment in Canadian history, full stop.
Wow.
So a huge deal for the Canadian tech ecosystem. For us here in Vancouver, BC, this is really a historic moment that the entire city is celebrating with us today, where we've really put Vancouver on the North American map as an emerging tech hub. And it's obviously a huge deal for legal tech more broadly, where this is in the top handful of deals over the last decade in legal tech, and just really exciting to have that amount of conviction and financial weight put behind Clio.
Yeah, I was trying to think about it last night when I was writing up my blog post for this morning in advance of the event today, and I was trying to remember larger investments in legal tech. There was the LegalZoom $500 million, which was a secondary investment. I don't know if there was anything else that of that same scale. I mean, there's some. I mentioned a couple of $200 million investment this year in Onnit. Interesting, also sort of an app marketplace model, but it's definitely one of the largest in legal tech that I can remember.
Yes.
So, what does that mean? What's the significance of that? What do you hope to do with that investment?
So we obviously have a bunch of plans that we can't talk about quite yet. But I think what we can talk about is the broad strokes for the opportunity that we see in the market. And that's one to, really take what we've started over the last 10 years and double down on it and really finish realizing our vision of transforming the practice of law for good. And I think if you look at Clio, and this investment round, I think, is what we'll end up regarding, with the benefit of hindsight, as a important bookend to our first 10 years, where we really focused on building the operating system for a law firm, a set of tools and technologies that helped lawyers run the business side of their law practice more effectively and more efficiently. And what this investment round sets us up for over the next decade is really more fully transforming how lawyers deliver their legal services to clients. And we've just started the process of bringing the practice of law out of its traditional bricks and mortar roots and moving it into the cloud. And we think by more fully realizing that vision of bringing legal service delivery to the cloud will open up a huge market opportunity for lawyers to tap into what we describe as the latent legal market that is currently untapped by lawyers. We can put a bookmark in that concept and talk about it a little bit more later. But also, really just helping lawyers improve the way that they're delivering their legal services to clients as well. I think if you look at the modern consumer of today, and certainly the consumer of tomorrow, the demand for legal services will be centered around online delivery through a smartphone rather than an in-person meeting. We think that the future of legal service delivery sees many more lawyers working out of a WeWork or working out of a home office rather than out of expensive AAA downtown office space. So we think that, broadly speaking, the legal industry is one of the last, if not the last, major industry to be fundamentally transformed by technology. And I think that what TCV and JMI saw in Clio, and certainly what we believe lies ahead as an opportunity for Clio, is to be that company, the company that does truly succeed in driving mass technology adoption in lawyers. As you know, you've written about this a lot. The overall adoption rate of technology in legal is still depressingly low. We think that the future for lawyers, both to remain competitive but also to tap into new market opportunities, is all going to be oriented around adopting new technologies that allows them to better serve their clients and serve their clients more efficiently. And we believe Clio will be the platform that those lawyers will adopt to gain that competitive edge.
Yeah, you spoke this morning at an event here announcing the investment. In your emphasis in your remarks was on bridging the access to justice gap. I mean, how do you see Clio as playing a role in addressing or bridging that gap?
Right. One of the things I like to frame the access to justice gap around is really at its heart a product market fit problem. I think that lawyers tend to talk about the access to justice gap as this externality that they don't necessarily have control over, and you don't hear Starbucks talking about the access to coffee gap, for example. I think that lawyers at the core are not delivering legal services in the way that consumers want to consume them. And when we talk about this access to justice gap, the facts paint a very clear story around where the problem lies. The World Justice Project, as you know, talks about the fact that 77% of legal issues that consumers had last year went unaddressed by a lawyer. So on the demand side, we see that there's an enormous unaddressed demand for help with legal issues that are not being met currently by lawyers. And then on the supply side, on the lawyers that can actually help those consumers and those businesses with their problems, we have every survey, the Legal Trends Report, the Thomson Reuters report, with lawyers saying the number one thing they need is more business and more revenue and more growth. So you look at this kind of dual-sided problem, this paradox almost, where we have enormous demand and enormous supply, but it's somehow not being met, I think is really at its heart a product market fit problem. And to bridge that gap, I truly believe that technology will be at the heart of helping bridge those two worlds and helping lawyers, number one, make themselves more accessible in the kind of modes of communication and modes of technology that consumers want to use, which, like I said, I think is more going to be internet-based and smartphone-based than sitting in a bricks-and-mortar office in the future. Lawyers need to be more discoverable. We need to make it easier for clients to find lawyers and connect with lawyers and start conducting business with lawyers. We need to make the process of actually interacting with a lawyer effortless as listening to a playlist on Spotify is, for example, or as effortless as binging on the latest season of your favorite show on Netflix is. And we need to make sure that technology is something that is constantly both reducing the overhead and cost of delivering legal services, enabling lawyers to tap into that latent legal market that finds, by and large, legal services too expensive to access, and then make the actual process, the delivery aspect of legal services, as efficient and streamlined and as positive a customer experience as possible.
Yeah, I know that you already said that you can't get too much into specifics, but you've with this $250 million investment, where do you see the product heading? Where does it need to go in order to continue to serve or better serve that mission that you've outlined?
So I really think that the next chapter of Clio's growth story and the next chapter of our product evolution is going to be anchored around the idea of improving the client experience. And I think you can really look at our first 10 years as building the legal operating system that lets a law firm run like a well-oiled machine, running effectively, running effortlessly, minimizing the overhead of running a law office as much as possible. And the broad strokes of what we'll be doing over the next decade will be improving the client experience for our customers. So allowing them to deliver their legal services in a way that their clients find the experience to be positive and something that leaves them with a very positive impression of interacting with that particular lawyer. And we think that's really the key to unlocking what we describe as the flywheel for legal, this growth engine that every law firm needs and the legal industry as a whole needs, which is ultimately driven, as the Legal Trends Report data shows, is largely driven by referrals and word of mouth. Lawyers, to drive growth in their law firm, really need net promoters coming out of interacting with them. They need people that found them to be amazing lawyers to work with. And everything around how a lawyer delivers their services to a client, which we broadly describe as the client experience, is something that Clio helps with to a certain degree today, but we're very early innings in realizing the vision for what we think the ultimate client experience vision looks like. And that's what we'll be investing a lot of energy in over the next handful of years.
Can you give me a specific example of a way in which you want the platform to better enable lawyers to better deliver that client experience?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you just a few instances of places that are unreasonably high friction in starting to work with a lawyer, for example. If you go to a typical lawyer's website, it puts up an 800 number for you to call to actually onboard with them. What do most people dread the idea of? Placing or receiving a phone call these days, right? So right off the bat, hey, interested in my legal services? You happen to find my website? We're immediately asking for what is described as a medium switch, which is switching from something like email to a phone call, or from the web to a phone call, which is actually entirely negative impact on the client experience right off the bat. The first thing we as lawyers are doing in a typical workflow is asking for somebody to phone us. So we think that initial intake and interaction process should be entirely online. We think that there's an opportunity to have the intake process be a chat-driven bot, for example, that can help do screening and intake for a lawyer, so that what you're doing in the morning, first thing on Tuesday morning, is sitting down with the consultations that Clio helps schedule for you, maybe with zero interaction from your end in scheduling those appointments. You're helping screen and work with maybe a handful of potential clients that Clio helped intake from your website. Another place I think that there's enormous opportunity for improving the client experience is every place that lawyers still use email. And I'll give you a first-hand example. In doing this transaction, I had no fewer than 9 law firms across the various parties working on this deal, and email was still the mode of communication that all of these documents were flying back and forth, different comments and edits and red lines and versions. And
there's technology out there for that,
that was my thought. That was my thought. This way of delivering documents and collaborating on documents, even collaborating with the other side on documents, has so much opportunity for improvement. So I think, broadly speaking, killing email would be another great place to improve the client experience. So those are just a couple of places. I look at areas like integrated video chat, secure video chat being part of the equation, where, when I talk about moving away from bricks and mortar, I don't mean moving away from face-to-face, but I think that we can achieve 99% of the value of a face-to-face meeting through a secure video chat, and that being an integrated part of the platform. We make it really easy for lawyers to jump on a phone call with a client to give that reassurance that, for example, I've reviewed your will carefully, and here's the 2 or 3 things I want to talk about. We think that there's an enormous opportunity to still provide the value of a face-to-face interaction, which again, the Legal Trends Report shows us is actually something that clients still demand, but it doesn't need to be through a bricks and mortar interaction. It can be through a secure video chat.
Right. We'll get back to my interview in just a moment, but first, let's take a break to hear from the sponsors who generously support LawNext. And now, let's continue this week's interview. I wanted to turn back to some of the news that you announced today, and one of the announcements was that Mark Britton has joined the board. Mark, of course, is the founder of Avvo, sold it last year, was it, to Internet Brands. To me, that's really interesting because I think I'm on the record as having written both about Clio and about Avvo, that those are probably the 2 companies that have most directly transformed the law practice over the last decade or so. So the thought of the 2 of you working together in some way is sort of like putting a match to something. I think it's really an interesting combination. But what do you think? What do you think?
Yeah,
Mark, what does Mark bring to the board, and what do you think of this?
Yeah, well, I'm likewise super excited to be working with Mark, and think it's a tremendous opportunity for us to do something really special over the next few years. Mark, I got to know well and became friends with over the course of the last decade, building 2 big legal technology companies a few hours drive away from each other. Mark, of course, being based in Seattle, and us up here in Vancouver, and always had a huge amount of respect and admiration for Mark. Avvo was always a few turns of the growth curve ahead of Clio in terms of its scale and scope. So I felt like Mark was always a useful mentor and advisor for me over the course of the last 10 years of building Clio. And when this investment round was coming around, finding a really great independent director was one of the top items for me on my list of what I want the next chapter of Clio to look like. And one of the things we saw at the board level that we were lacking was somebody with real deep legal technology and legal landscape know-how. We've got some of the best people in the world when it comes to building software as a service companies, building cloud companies, taking companies public, you name it. Deep bench on that front. But we were weak on the legal front, and Mark's experience in building Avvo, and of course his experience in Expedia and other companies prior to that is just enormously valuable to us. The experience that he can bring to bear on Clio's next chapter of growth, I think, in many ways, we have a common vision for what the future of legal services needs to look like to survive and to thrive in the 21st century. So I'm unbelievably excited about welcoming Mark to the board, and for him to have a more formal advisory and steering input on what the direction of Clio looks like in the future.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's also interesting that he has that kind of consumer-facing experience or record with Avvo that seems to merge well with your what you were just saying about trying to help lawyers improve the client experience. I mean, he's got that experience trying to bridge that world between the lawyers and the consumers who need their services.
Absolutely. I think that there's an unbelievable amount of synergy between Mark's past experience in building Avvo and some of his learnings and what worked well as what didn't work well in the model that Avvo was creating, and our future vision for Clio, what the next 10 years of Clio will look like. And I just think it's really hard to tap in. It's hard to think, as you put, hard to think of somebody else in the legal space that could provide more impact and more perspective to Clio as we enter our next decade than Mark.
Yeah, and you said Mark is going to be a investor at some level in the company as well.
Yeah, that's right. Mark also participated in this Series D investment round. So we're thrilled to have him not only as a independent board member, but also as an investor that he's excited enough about the future prospects for Clio that he wanted to be part of the investment team, and that's huge validation for me, and something I'm really excited to welcome aboard as both an investor and independent board member.
Yeah. So let's talk about the principal investors here, TCV and JMI Equity. Tell us more about them and what do they bring to the table for Clio?
So I think what we were looking for in the investors we brought on board for this next phase of Clio's growth was in investors that invest in long-term companies that have transformative impacts on the industries that they're in. And there are...
So they're not looking to make a quick buck, is that
They're not looking to make a quick buck. And there is, look, Clio's seen a huge amount of success over the last decade. We're in the privileged position to have a long lineup of VCs and private equity type folks that would love to put money into the company. And I spent an enormous amount of time over the last 18 months or so interviewing and screening the investors that we would let in this next investment round. And where TCV and JMI both really shone in my eyes was having a very clear long-term view on the companies that they're investing in. I think one example with TCV that I think is just a terrific example of that mindset is Netflix. TCV invested in Netflix back in 1999 when it was just a gestational idea. Invested in them through their DVD business's growth. When Netflix had the stumble that you might recall of Quickster, I think it was called, when they tried to spin off their DVD business from their streaming business, and their customers rioted and their stock plummeted. TCV saw that as a bit of turbulence, but nothing to be worried about, and actually reinvested in the company, doubled down on their investment, and helped propel Netflix to their next stage of growth. And now they've been invested in the company for the better part of 20 years. Making that long-term bet and reinvesting on the whole ride up. And you compare it and contrast that with many investors that are looking for that quick buck, looking for the next liquidity event, looking for a way to get their money out. The likes of TCV and JMI just have a totally different view on the world, almost like a Warren Buffett long-term view on what valuable companies truly are and how that value compounds over time. And I found that they were highly values aligned with us in terms of how they conduct business and how they want to support the companies that they invest in. And I think if you look at their portfolio, it's a great list of companies that have had unbelievable transformative impacts on the industries they're in. Companies like Spotify, companies like Point Click Care, companies like Netflix. That Airbnb is another great example that are both enduring long-term companies, but have also really transformed the business model of the industries they're in.
And TCV has invested in the legal space before. It was an investor in Avvo.
That's right.
Which coincidentally, Mark's company, or not coincidentally, and LegalZoom.
And
right?
LegalZoom, that's right.
And JMI had not. Is this its first investment in legal? Or
yeah, this is JMI's first significant investment in legal. And you're right. TCV has long had a thesis around the legal space, that there's opportunity for technology company in legal, that there's opportunities to, both reinvent the client facing side of legal, as well as reinventing the firm facing technology side of legal. And they've got a very well developed thesis around the kind of opportunity that legal presents. On a maybe a related note, I wanted to ask you. I know that you recently joined the board of Ross Intelligence. That's right.
And as I'm sure you know, I was out there visiting them recently, and was kind of impressed with what they've built and how, where the direction they're heading in right now.
Very impressive team.
But I wonder, do you see does the fact that you're on their board suggest that you see any synergies between what you're doing here at Clio and what they're doing?
That's a great question. I really joined the board of Ross Intelligence for a few different reasons. Number one, I've had the benefit of having 10 years in legal and learning a ton about legal. You'll recall from our first meeting at Legal Tech back in 2009, I think it was, that I was a newbie to legal. I was a technology guy by training, and really I've learned an enormous amount over the last decade around what it takes to succeed in legal and what building a great legal tech product looks like. And I'm at a stage in my career now where I'm, to a degree, trying to pay that forward and trying to help other founders realize the kind of success that Clio's had, and hopefully avoid some of the unnecessary self-inflicted wounds that they might otherwise have if they didn't have the benefit of some advice and coaching from somebody like myself. So when Andrew actually approached me about joining the Ross board, I just saw it as a great opportunity to help out another great legal tech founder, help out another emerging Canadian success story that has a tremendous opportunity about it. And I do think that they're very mission aligned with us in that they're another, I think, very important component of what transforming the practice of law looks like. Lawyers taking advantage of tools like Ross are a really critical component of them becoming more efficient and more effective in their job, and helping more broadly make themselves more accessible to consumers. So there's a long list of reasons I joined that and advise a handful of other legal tech startups to the same end, where I'm just at a stage I'd love to pay it forward and help out the broader legal tech ecosystem, because I see so much opportunity for more companies like Clio to be built in legal.
Yeah, you last year you acquired Lexicata and developed Clio Grow out of that. Do you see now that you've got all this cash in your pocket, more acquisitions coming down the pike? I
see us broadening the breadth and depth of our product offerings substantially over the next handful of years, and we'll do that both by developing features, organically here at Clio with our product development team. And I do see acquisitions being an important part of our growth and development strategy going forward as well. There's amazing companies that have been built out over the last handful of years in legal that I could see being part of a future product portfolio for Clio. So Lexicata was our first acquisition, but I'm sure it won't be our last.
You had at this event this morning various dignitaries here, including a member of Parliament, the mayor of Burnaby. Just what does this mean for this location that you're in, for the city of Burnaby, for British Columbia, for Canada?
Yeah, I mean, I think what this morning's event really drove home for me, and it did feel like a bit of an out of body experience for me to be looking out at the dignitaries and the press and the cameras rolling in our fourth floor lounge today. It really drove home for me just how momentous and what a historic event this is for Burnaby, for Vancouver, for British Columbia, for Canada, and for legal tech. It's a really big deal, and to have that level of government support, to have that level of support from the broader community here in Vancouver was just really incredible. And I think that one of the things we hope to spur on is the broader growth of the Vancouver technology scene. It's one of the most important emerging parts of Vancouver's economy, but it's still very, very early days. And we need a few more successes like Clio to really double down on that growth story. Even at a Canadian level, we've had a few great breakout hits like Shopify, for example, and like Nortel and like BlackBerry before Shopify. But that list is relatively small, and my vision and my hope for Clio is that we become the next breakout success story for Canada. I think this round is a great step in that direction, but we've still got...
It's a pretty big step in that direction.
We've still got a lot of work ahead of us.
Yeah.
And my vision for Clio, I always describe moments like this as a milestone to our team. They're not it's not any kind of finish line. If anything, it's a start line.
Yeah.
And the goal ahead of us is to build, a company that's transformed the practice of law, a company that has transformed the technology scene in Vancouver and Canada in general, and a company that is enduring, and a company that even at scale, even at 400 employees today and 1,000 employees in a couple of years, that will still have and enjoy the great culture that we have today, which is something I want to try my best to ensure that we scale and maintain over the next stage of our growth.
Yeah. But you said 100 new jobs by the end of the year.
Yeah,
right?
We're at 400 today. We're going to be over 500 by December 31st this year. We're just on an unbelievable growth trajectory from both from a growth perspective overall, but of course the supporting team to drive that growth is going to be growing exponentially as well.
Yeah. So it is early September, September 4th to be precise, as we're sitting here, and you're less than 2 months away from your annual conference taking place in San Diego this year.
That's right.
Here's where you get to put in a plug.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. October 21st and 22nd in sunny San Diego, we will be hosting the Clio Cloud Conference, which I unabashedly call the best conference in legal. But I think you've called it something close to that as well.
I have said good things about it. That's for sure.
So yeah, we would love to have your listeners join us at the Clio Cloud Conference. I think one of the important things to note is that the Clio Cloud Conference today is much more than just a user conference for Clio.
Yeah.
We have thousands of lawyers joining us, Clio users and non-users alike, joining us to discover what the future of legal looks like and what the future of legal technology looks like. So I think regardless of whether your listeners are Clio users or not, we would welcome them to the conference, and I'm sure we can set you up with a discount code for your listeners to get a good deal on attending the Clio Cloud Conference that they can get in the comments or the description of this podcast.
All right. Well, you hear that, listeners. Jack Newton said you can get a discount, so we'll figure out how we do that.
Tell my team Jack sent you.
Tell them Jack sent you. Law Sites. Okay. There's your discount code, Law Sites. Well, Jack, I really appreciate your having me up here today for this event, and congratulations to you. It really does feel kind of like as you said, a turning point. Just the timing of it, in a sense, after a little more than a decade now, but
that's
you've
right.
been in business. But somebody else said to me this morning, it feels sort of like bookending the first decade and the beginning of the next one. But it's exciting news. Any final words you want to say before we wrap up today?
No, I think that it's incredible opportunity that we have ahead of us. It feels like Clio as a company has had a number of cheerleaders and fans and supporters over the years, and I guess to conclude, I want to send a big thank you to the likes of yourself, Bob, that have given us coverage and exposure over the last decade, for the listeners you have, and for the broader legal tech community. It's certainly felt like we've had incredible support over the last decade of achieving our vision for the first chapter of Clio's growth, and really excited to embark on this next chapter of Clio's growth with the same kind of enthusiasm.
Well, you and I have certainly had a number of conversations over the years as news has developed with your company over the years, and a number of podcast conversations as well. So I look forward to continuing those conversations over the next decade and beyond.
More news to come.
Well, this has been a special edition of LawNext. This is Bob Ambrogi. Thanks for listening.